Hi guys, hope everyone is well and welcome back to the Improvement Podcast. So today I'm going to touch on the circadian rhythm, the importance of it, and what you can do to maintain a healthy circadian rhythm. First of all, quick update on myself. So just finished a devolume week, so just basically doing one set per exercise, not taking any forced reps or half reps or burying myself into the ground during training. Just with the role or the aim of dropping fatigue or physical and mental tiredness, because you can't just keep digging yourself a hole, because you need to climb back out of it. And if you keep digging yourself a hole, you will not perform as well, you will not feel great on a daily basis, you'll run into injuries. So it's important to pull back now and then if you're constantly got your foot in the ground or pedal down, you know what I mean, and going full on. Sometimes that's the best thing you can do, because this week, after having that devolume week, I've had such a good week of training. I've took great progressions, which I'm really happy with, and I feel better for it. I've got the itch to train more than I did before, not that it ever leaves, but I'm just feeling the benefit of it for sure. And so not really much to comment on apart from that. I'm enjoying training, and just life as a whole, really. I'm in a good spot. I think 10 or 9 weeks to prep, so big sense of urgency building muscle again, like I said a few weeks ago. So just trying to maximise that while not being too boring outside the gym and spending time with people, that sort of thing. So jumping into this episode on the circadian rhythm. So the circadian rhythm is basically our internal body clock, and it basically regulates our sleep-wake cycle. So the reason I'm making a podcast on this is, one, because I enjoy it, find it interesting, and two, I think it can be valuable for a lot of people to hear a bit more about it and how they can manage it. So yeah, it basically regulates your sleep-wake cycle, meaning like when you get up, when you go to bed, and it will have a lot of benefits if you can keep a decent sleep-wake cycle from managing your circadian rhythm. So it does last just like a wee bit longer. It's either longer or shorter than a day. So it's 24 hours and I believe 20 minutes. It's not quite 24 hours, which is why we have to keep on top of it and take actions to try and make sure we're resetting our circadian rhythm, or basically taking steps so that it doesn't get out of sync to what time we wake up and go to bed. Because if it does, sleep will suffer, and our overall ability to recover will suffer, mental focus will suffer, all sorts. And I'll try not go on about sleep too much, because I seem to find a way to go back to sleep and talk about it every podcast. It is something I find really fascinating if you've not noticed yet anyway. So the importance of it is just due to circadian rhythm impacting our sleep quality massively, as I said. And the reason why is when we wake up, due to our circadian rhythm, we release cortisol upon wake, which is basically the stress hormone. And when cortisol is released, we are alert. Well, it helps us alertness, it helps us function and just be awake and not be like all draggy and tired throughout the morning. And that's when cortisol, or the stress hormone, is at its highest. And in terms of before bed, we have melatonin and serotonin getting released, which are, I believe, melatonin is sleep hormone and serotonin is kind of feel-good hormone, I believe. Don't quote me on that. And it just basically helps you relax. I think serotonin, they tie into each other, so I think serotonin may have an impact on melatonin production, but I believe basically they tie into each other and both help promote a good and quality sleep. And if we go to sleep when we are supposed to wake up, for example, when cortisol's high, we don't sleep well, because cortisol stops us producing melatonin, which is a sleep hormone, which basically regulates our sleep. So what this tells us is we basically want to be going to sleep at a time when melatonin will be released, and we want to keep that routine so that we get that melatonin, we're able to sleep, and we want to basically take steps to keep melatonin being released as well as serotonin before bed, which I'll get into. So as a result, if we don't have the good sleep wake time, have these hormones released, we won't have a great sleep and we won't have a great ability to progress in comparison to if they were in a good spot. And in general, you'll just function poorer during the day, which is why it's important to maintain. So there's a lot we can do, thankfully, to maintain a healthy circadian rhythm. As I said, the reason why we should try and maintain it is because it shifts by 20 minutes every day. So if you think about it, if you usually go to bed at 10 and you're used to that, then 20 minutes, that means in 3 nights you'll be used to go, or you'll be ready to go to bed an hour later if you don't do anything to reset your circadian rhythm. And obviously 6 days, that's 2 hours. And then, 12 days will be 4 hours, so we'll get in bed at 1 o'clock if we aren't doing the things that we need to do to maintain that healthy circadian rhythm, which I'm just about to jump into. So, when we wake up, we want to basically be exposed to bright light. And this can either be from the sun or a sad light. And the reason being is because when we're exposed to bright light, it tells our body it's daytime and we should be up, and it kind of kickstarts our circadian rhythm into getting that cortisol production and basically thinking it's the morning. Because if we aren't exposed to that bright light, our body basically doesn't know it is the morning. And the reason how bright light affects us is our eyes take it in, if that makes sense. Our eyes sense that bright light. And yeah, the sun's probably our best option to do so, to expose yourself to that bright light. But obviously in the winter months, we've not got much sun, we've not got much light at all, so we should try and maybe use a sad light. So a sad light is basically a seasonal affective disorder light, which helps with people who have seasonal affective disorder, as the name probably suggests. And just basically turning a sad light on, which is just basically, it looks like a screen, but the whole thing lights up with a really bright light, and just keeping that beside you in the morning and just turning all the lights on in your house, in your room, will help you be exposed to that bright light and tell your body it's basically morning, so it resets its body clock. And this will just help with alertness and your general mood throughout the day, and you won't be as tired generally throughout the day, I believe. And since you're exposed to that bright light in the morning, it tells your body it's morning, and when it gets to night time, you'll find you'll fall asleep easier. Next, in terms of how we can basically keep our circadian rhythm aligned, is our routine sleep-wake. So if we are getting up and going to bed at different times, then it's going to be all over the place. So the best thing we can do is try and get sleep and wake up at the same time, because if we've got a internal body clock of 24 hours, let's say we wake up one day at 11, and instead of going to sleep, let's say the night before you got to sleep at, we'll say 2 and woke up at 11. If you try and get to bed at, we'll say 9 o'clock because you're up really early for work, you will struggle to get sleep because you've not been up as long. And the reason why is we've got something called sleep pressure that builds up throughout the day. And if we basically don't have as much sleep pressure, we won't have that urge to sleep as much. We won't have that melatonin being produced as early in the day because we've not been up for as long as we usually have, because your body thinks you're going to be up for longer, if that makes sense. So that's why you sometimes struggle to get to bed early if you are used to staying up late, or if, let's say, you're going on holiday. Obviously excitement plays a part, but if you're trying to get to bed nice and early so that you can get up on time to make your flight, sometimes you can't sleep just due to being used to that other sleep-wake time, if that makes sense. Which just highlights the importance of routine. And it's like, if anyone's ever been super routined with their sleep, you usually just wake up without your alarm because you're used to waking up at that time. And you can also experience the opposite. If you try and sleep in, you will probably not be able to. So that's something I can't really do very well, just because I'm used to getting up early. So when it hits 7, I can't really sleep. Sometimes I can try and sleep a bit longer, but I'm at that stage where I'm half asleep, half awake, but I'm not in a proper deep sleep because it's 7. And next thing we can do is training and exercising. So this basically can help regulate our body clock. Ideally, we shouldn't do this in 2 hours of bed, because when we think of training, what is training? Training is a stress on our body. Training can produce cortisol, the stress hormone, due to being a stress, like I just said. And as I touched on earlier, what does cortisol do? Or the stress hormone? It stops us from producing the sleep hormone, melatonin, which helps us sleep. So we should try and not exercise within 2 hours before bed, because we ideally want that melatonin being produced. Next up, something we can do is avoid caffeine later in the day. So the reason why is because caffeine's a stimulant, and instead of being in a relaxed state, if we have it close to bed, we're going to be in that fight or flight state. Again, when we're in that fight or flight state, stress is higher, cortisol will be higher, which again, we're not going to be producing that sleep hormone and be able to get to sleep. Also, if your heart rate's higher, you're not going to be able to sleep well. If anyone's ever finished a late shift or been running about before bed and they get in bed, you just find you're restless, your heart rate's high, and that's not putting you in a good position to sleep. You want your heart rate to ideally drop, which can be done by just simply relaxing and chilling. And next up, after avoiding caffeine later in the day, in fact, I'll jump into when to stop having caffeine if you want to maximize your sleep. So we know caffeine, it varies for the individual, but usually people have around about a 5 hour half-life of caffeine, which means if you consume 2 cups of coffee at 12 o'clock, you'll still have a cup of coffee in you at 5 o'clock, and then all the coffee will be out your system by 10. Whereas if you have 2 cups of coffee at 5 p.m, that means by 10, if you go to sleep at 10, you'll have 1 cup of coffee in your system. What I mean by 1 cup of coffee, I don't mean you'll pee out a coffee and you'll still have 1 coffee in you. I mean, you'll have that caffeine from 1 coffee still in your system, which is why we should avoid it later in the day. And people usually have it because they're tired, but if you're sleeping worse, you're going to be tired, and then you're going to want more caffeine, and it's just like a vicious cycle. And in order to break that cycle, I recommend just cutting caffeine out later in the day. And some people tolerate caffeine better than others, and if let's say you have caffeine frequently, you might not find it as much of an issue. But some people are more sensitive. Like if I have coffee past 1 o'clock, I can't really sleep well. I'm sitting in bed at 10, and I just feel like my heart's racing a bit, and I'm a bit restless and can't really switch off as well, because I don't have caffeine much, just due to not really agreeing with me and giving me headaches when I train. So, as I've mentioned numerous occasions, I believe. So next up, we don't really want to nap later in the day. So, as I touched on, if any of you have napped during the day, maybe after school when you're in school or after work, you'll probably experience this. And the reason why it doesn't help us sleep well at night is because sleep pressure builds up. So what I mean by this is, when we have the urge to sleep build up from the moment we wake to the moment we put our head in the pillow and enter sleep. And this basically helps us sleep and gives us the urge to sleep. And when we go to sleep, we get rid of that sleep pressure. So if we are napping later in the day, let's say you go to bed at 10, let's say you have a 30-minute nap at 7, you've got no sleep pressure built up, which gives you that urge to sleep and that ability to go to sleep nice and easily, just due to napping earlier, which basically drops all that sleep pressure and removes it. So that means you're going to struggle to get to sleep later on, which you have probably experienced, or I have at least. So ideally, if you don't want this to take place and you like to nap, we should try and do so earlier in the day. I think before 2 o'clock is ideal. Obviously, if you go to sleep at a different time, work night shift, that's going to make a difference to what time. But I'm talking about if you've got an average sleep wake time, then about 2 o'clock, we shouldn't try and nap after that, I believe. Something around that. And in terms of if you've ever stayed up all night, this is something quite interesting as well. You'll find 2 o'clock, 2 to 5, something like that, you're really tired. But when you get to that time when you usually wake up, due to your circadian rhythm, you get that cortisol being released. The hormones that basically wake you up and give you that alertness in the morning are released later in that day when you're basically going to wake up anyway. And as a result of this is because that's your wake time. That's because of your circadian rhythm, your 24-hour clock. taking place. And that's why you get the urge to sleep before that, before you're usually awake. But then when you get to when you're supposed to be awake, you are all alert, a bit more like, oh, I'm not feeling too tired. Then you'll get throughout that day and you'll feel absolutely smashed, and then usually gets to like 5 p.m. and then you're just falling asleep by then, if you've ever pulled an all-nighter when you were younger or just had a late night out. And another thing we can do is just being routined with our nutrition. So I'm not sure if there's any data to support this, but just simply not eating super close to bed and having a routine in place with our food can do you a lot of good. Not just from a getting your calories in standpoint, meeting your goals for the day standpoint, hunger standpoint, but just from, if we, let's say if we're routine with it, we eat good 2 hours before bed, that means we'll be digesting our food so we're not going to sleep on a full stomach, we'll be able to get sleep earlier, that sort of thing, because we don't want our food to be, we don't want to be digesting that food, because when we're digesting food, our body temperature goes up, and also as well as that, our heart rate goes up. Those two things we don't want when we're trying to sleep, because when our heart rate goes up, we're not in a relaxed state. We want our heart rate to be nice and low when we're sleeping, and also we want our body temperature to drop when we're trying to sleep, which is why we sleep in a cool environment. So you should try and basically not have like food close to bed. And I think overall, just being routine with our nutrition, our body thrives off not just routine with nutrition, routine as a whole. So if we can maximize our routine, be more routine in general, then I think it will do just everyone a lot of good. So yeah, that's how you basically manage your circadian rhythm. So just basically, in fact, I didn't even touch on light exposure at night. So when it gets to later in the day, we basically don't want to be exposed to bright lights, because as I touched on, bright light tells our body it's time to sleep. Sorry, got that wrong. Bright light tells our body it's time to be awake, it's time to be alert, it is the morning. Just think about the sun. The sun's brightest, obviously, like in the morning and afternoon, and then sunset takes place, and then it's more of an orange sunset type thing at night, and we've not really got much light in the sky, and then it's dark, obviously, when it gets to night. What it tells us is we should try and replicate this by only having warm lights on at night, and not having super bright lights on at night time, and this will basically tell our body it's night time. And the reason we don't want bright lights at night is because it will stop us from producing, again, melatonin, and due to this we will not sleep as well. So yeah, we should try and have like red lights, warm lights, if that makes sense, at night time, and not bright LED lights. If you have ever seen the funny glasses I wear, sometimes you might see it on my story. I've also done a post on this of wearing blue light blockers. It basically blocks out blue light and has like a tint to them so that you don't get exposed to that blue light that stops you from sleeping. And you can do this just by using things like candles, putting on a wee lamp instead of a big bright light. Not only does like blue light and LED light stop you from sleeping, it's also bright lights as well. So generally, if you can just have a dimmer light on, that is ideal, and it's something you can do that's not really going to be that inconvenient to your day. It's literally just putting a bit of a dimmer light on, so it's not the end of the world if you can't have the big light on in your room, if that makes sense. So yeah, like I said, you can put like blue light blockers on, which I use. You can put like night, I can't remember what it's called on your phone. I think it's night shift mode. If you've got an iPhone, you can probably get something similar for Android. You can get it on your laptop now. You can also change the brightness on your TV, and all the wee things add up. It might sound silly, but if you put all these steps in place, then it can have like a big outcome. The reason why we want that warm light is, if you think about like in olden days, when it gets to night, there's no LED lights, there's no big light on in a cave, is there? Or you've not got your phone with you. What you have is probably like a fire. That's about it. So if you think about what fire is, it's a warm red light, which is why we should try and replicate that, because we don't get bright LED lights at night time in those times, if that makes sense. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the podcast and took some valuable information that you can apply to this, and make sure you try and apply for it if you're trying to improve your knowledge, get more results when it comes to training in the gym. it's all good knowing everything, but if you don't apply it, then you're not gonna make most of your training. It's all about application, because you can know a lot, but if you don't execute it, then what good is that information got? So yeah, hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope everyone is having a great week. If you listen to this on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, subscribe, like, show what support you can, and share it on your story if you can. That would be greatly appreciated. Help spread the podcast, and I hope everyone has a great week.